Good morning and welcome to West Cork Literary Festival. Delighted to see so many of you here today. I was really nervous standing up here, but I just realised that actually none of you care what I'm going to say. So I'm going to keep it really, really brief. Obviously it's a huge honour for the festival to have Gloria Steinem here today. I invited her as a kind of, why not? I have 5 minutes, I'll send an email and never think about it again. So it was a huge shock when she said actually that she would like to come to Ireland. This is her first visit to Ireland, so I'm absolutely... So I'm so thrilled that she's choosing to spend it at West Cork Literary Festival and that all of you turned up to give her such a great welcome. So Gloria is going to be in conversation today with Sasha Pisco. Sasha is originally from Clonakilty here in West Cork. She works for the Scottish Book Trust and organises events for Book Week Scotland. Thank you very much. She is also a writer and has a books podcast and is a feminist, but I would hope that that word applies to everybody here in this room. And ideally to everybody in the world, but I think we're working on that one person at a time. Sasha and Gloria are going to be in conversation today, and there will be plenty of opportunities for all of you to put questions and comments to Gloria as well. Unfortunately, because she's on such a tight schedule, there won't be time for signing books after the event. But I don't think you're going to be disappointed when the event is over, because I think it's going to be absolutely wonderful. And I'd just like to comment as well on the fact that we've closed the curtains because there might be a little bit of glare, and even though there's a magnificent view outside, I think this is the view that you actually came for. So I'll hand you over now to Gloria and Sasha, and I hope you all have a wonderful time. Thank you.
I don't think I've ever had so much applause with an event yet to start. That was amazing. It's like being at a rock concert. It's amazing. I'm going to do a really quick intro and then we'll just fire into questions. But there'll be loads of chance for you all to get involved and talk. A huge part of Gloria's events, if you've read the book, is about dialogue and conversation. So she'd really love to hear all of your stories, all of your concerns, all that. We can have a chat about that. In terms of an introduction, it's sort of difficult to know where to start when you're talking about Gloria Steinem. I mean, you're a political and feminist icon and one of the most, amazing voices in the fight for equal rights in the last, 50, 60 years. It's a huge honour to be here speaking to you today. Gloria's a writer, a lecturer, a speaker, a traveller, a storyteller. In her new book, My Life on the Road, which obviously you can buy today, she describes herself as a celestial bartender, which even just having spoken to you for half an hour, I can definitely say is accurate. Stories just come out when you chat to her, and you'll get to see that today. But what I think is most exciting to me about Gloria is that even though you bring a wealth of experience and history of activism with you today, you're still a huge active part of the feminist community. You're still present, you still fight for equality every day, you're interested in the struggles of others, you're inquisitive, and above all, you're really inclusive of all feminisms and all people. And I couldn't be more delighted to be able to pick your brains today. So thank you for having me on, and please join me again for bringing a giant welcome to Gloria Steinem.
I want you to know that I have a repeal shirt. Okay?
The goal is to get them on as many humans' bodies as possible and just wear them out in force every day, even if they're stinking. I've had this on all week. So to kick us off, one of the first stories that stood out to me in your book is about how you became okay with public speaking. I found it really heartening to hear that you weren't a fan, because you can say that you're all right with it, and then you sit in front of 450 people and it all gets a bit scary. So I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about how that happened for you, how you became okay with standing up in front of all these people and chatting for a living.
It probably is important to talk about, because I understand in public opinion polls, public speaking is a fear right up there with death. And female human beings fear it more, people who are out of power in any way fear it more. So finding our voices is really very important. I would never have done it. I was in my earlier mid-30s, I think, and I had devoted a lot of my life to never speaking in public. Part of the reason I'd been two things, a dancer and a writer. And then there were other, after she wanted to stay home with the baby, then there was Florence Kennedy. Do anybody here know the outrageous Florence Kennedy? And so in that way of being fearful, kind of giving into the fear enough to have a partner was a good thing, you know, because it was way better than going out by myself. And I did discover the basic truth of public speaking, which is you don't die. And because the other thing, good thing about giving into fear in a way or recognizing it is that because I didn't want to talk that much, the discussions were always longer than the speech. And that was great, you know, because I don't learn when I'm talking. I learn when you're talking, right? And also audiences become groups and meet each other. And you would know that things were really happening when somebody over here asked a question and somebody over there answered it. And there was organizing, and you knew that, you know, there was going to be revolution tomorrow because people had come together today. So if anybody here is still suffering from fear of public speaking, I would say that the adage, follow the fear, you know, fear is a sign of growth, is not wrong.
Brilliant. And it's definitely a very safe space to make your voice heard today, for sure. Something that really struck me reading the book is just that you have lived through, experienced, and been part of some of the biggest political moments of the 20th and 21st century. And you know, you write about them so casually. You're like, oh yeah, we were hanging out, and then Martin Luther King did his
Well, you don't know their moments when you're in them. I mean, who knows what this time right now will be in history? Hello, right?
How does it feel to, you know, to look back and see history just looking back at you, you know, from JFK to Martin Luther King to Obama? It's just...
Well, I think what's important about it probably is understanding how confusing it was at the time. So it helps us understand that it's okay that it's confusing now. It wasn't clear. I mean, the March on Washington with Martin Luther King that now seems like a historical certainty was feared for many reasons. First, because it might be violent. Second, because it might stop the Civil Rights Act from being passed by exciting opposition. You know, third, because it might fail. You know, people who were doing it were afraid that not enough people would turn. It was not easy. And yet, when it happened, it just felt like a totally natural event. Because it was, because people's consciousness and need to come to Washington and say the country belongs to us, and also the determination to prove the skeptics wrong, meant that when you stood up and looked at the crowd from the Lincoln Memorial, which no doubt you've seen, you know, this big reflecting pool there, it was like an ocean of people, all peaceful and all looking after each other. And yet at the same time, not completely equal, which also was an education. because by accident I was marching together with a woman and her daughter, whom I didn't know. We just fell together in the crowd. And she, an older woman, which means she was younger than I am now, was critical of the march, which I never dreamed of being, because she was saying, but where are the women? Why is Fannie Lou Hamer not speaking, a great heroine of the civil rights movement? You know, why are all the speakers men? And I was not there yet in my head, you know, so it was a revelation. So it was both about a crescendo of a movement in the present and about the future.
Something that was really clear, actually, you know, through your description of different now historical moments was how they weren't easy. You know, you look back on them and you're like, yes, well, obviously civil rights happened, votes for women happened, and you know, when you're fighting for rights that are important and serious, like for example, repealing the 8th Amendment, you think, oh my God, you know, we're causing such a fuss for being so inconvenient to so many people and so unpleasant. What are we going to do? But actually, that's a natural part of activism.
Well,
I think.
and actually, that woman, Mrs. Green, educated me that, you know, she would have had a repeal shirt on if she were alive today, because she was very aware that Fannie Lou Hamer, who was a hero of our African American woman in Mississippi, of the voter registration movement, had also been, when she went into a Mississippi hospital for something else, had been sterilized without her knowledge or permission. Now, this, you know, black women were being sterilized at the same time that white women could not get a voluntary sterilization without the written permission of their husband, and they already had 2 children. I mean, how racist is that? You know, how clear is that? And also she knew that Fannie Lou Hamer's, I think, grandmother had 20 children, I believe, many of them by rape, by whoever owned the plantation. And what was the difference between the 20 children that her grandmother had and her sterilization? Farm equipment. They no longer needed cheap labor. So, I mean, what could be more clear than that? That women's bodies are controlled because we have wombs. If we didn't have wombs, we'd be fine. It's all about controlling reproduction for economic and racist reasons. And, you know, we, men and women, we all have a right to control our own physical bodies. The government does not control from the skin in, I'm sorry.
We were talking about this before, and we knew that there'd be a point in the event where I'd give you a bit of a nod, and it was like, right, it's time to talk about the 8th Amendment. So it's time to talk about the 8th Amendment. It'd be great if you could read perhaps the dedication in your book, because the dedication in the book, My Life on the Road, is particularly poignant for our political situation here in Ireland.
Well, you know, all movements, I think, that I know of are about people telling the truth about their lives and discovering that they're not alone after all and not obeying an unjust system, you know. So this is my story, but we all hear, or it's a hint of my story. This book is dedicated to Dr. John Sharp of London, who in 1957, a decade before physicians in England could legally perform an abortion for any reason other than the health of the woman, took the considerable risk of referring for an abortion a 22-year-old American on her way to India. Knowing only that she had broken an engagement at home to seek an unknown fate, he said, "You must promise me 2 things. First, you will not tell anyone my name. Second, you will do what you want to do with your life." Dear Dr. Sharp, I believe you, who knew the law was unjust, would not mind if I say this so long after your death. I've done the best I could with my life. This book is for you. I had a wonderful dinner last night with some of your, very activist, great leaders, including on the repeal movement. And I know that there are heroic doctors here, as well as Planned Parenthood and all the heroes. So you are the Dr. Sharps. Thank you.
That just gives me chills. But I think there's two really interesting points within the dedication. The first is the wording of the legislation in the UK even before, legal abortion was a thing, which is that it was for the health of the mother. That was what was paramount there, that could be recommended. Whereas here, what we have in the legislation currently is the wording where it's only when the life of the mother is at stake that a termination can be performed. And that's, it just shows how far we have to go with what we're trying to achieve, because it is, it's a small word, but it makes all the difference in terms of legislation. It was probably just badly written, but it has some dire consequences today.
No, it really, if the law has a direct relationship to a fertilized egg in a woman's body, that means that her body has been nationalized. It's under someone else's control. And that, for men or women, is unacceptable. I mean, I think we probably need all these battles, and we need to move on to a principle that I don't know what it will be called, but I think of it as bodily integrity. That the power of the government stops at your skin. Yes, they can imprison you, but they can't force you to give a kidney or, have injections or, decide what happens to your internal self. Right now, our laws in both of our countries protect private property more than bodies.
That's scary. If anyone has, at this point, any anecdotes or stories to share about, the abortion rights campaign, I'd love to hear them. There are roving microphones, so if you could just wait for a second. We've got one in the fourth row here.
Or organizing announcements of upcoming troublemaking meetings you want to It's what outsiders are for. We come and we're an excuse for you to get together, and you discover you didn't need us in the first place.
Hello, thank you for coming here. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
I want to say that this would not be a popular comment, I think, but I want to say that it's a little more complex than you're making out. I'm a doctor, and I'm retired now. I went to medical school in Ireland, and then I immediately went to America. I was very pro-choice, and couldn't stand the nuns, had to get out of here. And very immature as well. And one of the first things I did, I was a surgical pathologist, and one of the first things I faced was what they call POCs, which were large circular ice cream containers, cardboard, and they were lined up on the counter every morning. And when I took off the lids, there were babies in them. They looked like babies. They were 16, 18, 20, 22-week-old babies. At that point, which was 1971, those babies wouldn't have survived. Nowadays, some of the older ones would. And I thought, well, that's what you get when you're pro-choice. And I thought to myself, goodness, if this was in an Irish hospital, you'd have people leaving and striking and saying they wouldn't process them. And I thought, where do I stand on this? And I thought, well, no, I'm pro-choice. These babies wouldn't survive. It's obvious the abortions have been done way too late. This is not right in a very intuitive sense. But I went ahead and did them because those were my principles. And I really haven't changed since. I am pro-choice, but I think we have to be more nuanced. And I realize that when you're fighting for something, it's very difficult to be nuanced. Now, after all that experience, I became a psychiatrist. I'll be brief. I'm not going to go on forever. And there are people who become psychotic and lose touch with reality. You mentioned injections. And I worked for 30 years as a psychiatrist. And there are people who do not know what is that who are completely crazy, who do not know that they are, do not understand it, and who can be saved by injections or intrusive methods. I'll give you an example of that recent case. I don't know anything personally. It was in the newspapers of a man, was it up in Donegal, somewhere in the West, who was totally nuts. His parents kept trying to get him into the hospital, and he eventually chopped both their heads off, I think. You guys will probably saw that in the paper. What I'm saying is there is a place for the state to take over somebody but it's extremely difficult. It's extremely complex, and we shouldn't back away from that complexity to try to make something simpler than it should be. I'm absolutely in favor of repeal. I am really angry about some of the things that I went through that I saw done, but we've got to be aware of complexity and not make it, not oversimplify it.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I have to say.
No, well, thank you. For speaking so eloquently on behalf of complexity. Absolutely. You know, because that's why we need individual stories. You know, not just blanket statements. You know, it also isn't as if abortion is a pleasurable experience. You know, women don't get up in the morning and say, well, it's a nice day, I think I'll have an abortion. You know, I mean, it's a very hard, difficult experience for individual, unique reasons. And the question really is, you know, what is the alternative? I mean, you know, we're all trying to make abortions much less frequent. And we know how to do that, you know, but unfortunately, in our case, in my country, and I think often here, the same forces that are against safe and legal abortion are also against sex education, contraception, all the things that would diminish the need for abortion. In the second instance the second world that you are opening up, which is whether or not a dysfunctional or psychotic or even self-harming person, you know, can still state, I do not want to have electric shock, or I do not want to have injections. And that's extraordinarily complex. And you know, the answer is not one simple answer, as you point out, but it is to have a process that allows voices to be heard, not only the voice of the person who is the danger to herself or himself and others, but also people who know the potential of the drugs or the shock treatment and so on. It's complicated. And you know, if there's any principle here, it is that there is no principle. You know, but there's a process by which we can come to the best possible conclusion that is available at the moment. But anyways, thank you for speaking up for that.
There's another one, thank you.
Thank you, Alpha Smith, Coalition to Repeal the Activism. I just want to start off by saying that personally, you were talking about historical moments, and that for me, this is a totally historical moment, because I've been reading you, following you, admiring you, been inspired by you for so many decades, and I think that's taught you, believe it or not, and you have always come up with the right answer, just as you did just now. You are always there, Gloria, and you're just a fantastic, wonderful feminist. And I
have to say, I do not always come up with the right
you do,
but I thank you for your support.
But I also want to say that as historical moments go, I mean, I am absolutely convinced that here in Ireland we are in a historical moment, and it is going to be incredibly big, because I believe that we're absolutely ready and totally willing, and I'm quite sure that this room is a very good microcosm of it, to for once and for all, ensure that that very basic freedom, that very basic right, that very basic just need that we have as women to have control of our own bodies and to make decisions about ourselves. We are so ready to say that and get out there and make as much trouble and as much noise and as much hoo-ha as it takes. And thank you for all your support. Thank you.
Since we're a bookish group, right? There is a book that I don't know if you've encountered or not, called The Burning Time by an American author, Robin Morgan, which is a loving, careful, researched account of a woman from the pagan Irish times. As pagan, of course, we know it's been made a bad word, but it just means nature, it means God and all living things, right? Who was a learned woman and could see the burning times, that is, the witch burning times, the murder of women because they taught the arts of healing and contraception and so on, coming across Europe. So you both see what existed before here and what was coming. And that book should be brought back, because you see, I think I find it really helpful and comforting to know that the whole hierarchy thing of masculine, feminine, and race and class and all this bullshit was not always here. That it's actually a relatively short period of human history.
And it's heartening to think that we could potentially get back to that at some point. Oh, we've got one down here. There's
I don't
microphones.
think I need a microphone, love.
That's me told.
My name is Marie Mulholland. I'm not from these parts, but I do live here in West Cork. I'm from Belfast. I run the West Cork Women Against Violence project right across the road. It's the domestic violence service for West Cork. I know that West Cork is very beautiful, stunning, but like anywhere, it has a dark underbelly, and that dark underbelly is violence against women. And I am delighted that there are so many feminists here in this room, and I'm hoping at least 50% of you are from West Cork, and that you'll start supporting the Domestic Violence Project, because we need funds, we need resources to keep. We deal with 200 women a year, we take 1,200 calls a year, and there are particular concerns about violence against women in a place like West Cork. It's very isolated, it's very rural, there is no public transport, we have no refuge. We have 7 islands. If someone's on an island and they're being battered, it's a real problem trying to get that woman to safety. And these are the kind of problems that occur in this area. The project here has been going for 17 years. It has a wonderful board of completely committed and dedicated women. Many of whom are in this room, I know. And I don't want to exploit your being here, Gloria, but I do kind of. Thank you for this glorious Gloria opportunity. Because I have been absolutely busting when I heard that you were coming. I got my tickets first. I told the board, I threatened them. I said, you've got to get your tickets, you must be there. I have 10 women down on the floors of my house tonight and last night who've come from Belfast, Dublin, Derry, Galway to be here to see you, okay? Because you are the glue that created us in the sense and tell us there, because we all have about 500 years of feminist activism. Because I've known these women from Belfast, from Derry, whatever. I mean, I've been getting women abortions for 35 years, sending them to the UK for abortions. And some of the women that are here with me are women that I used to ring up, maybe late on a Friday, and always, I tell you, it always happened at 5 o'clock on a Friday, when you thought you had time to go for a jar. And a woman would come here, a women's centre, and she was desperate. And I had a bunch of women that I could call and say, can you give me 5 quid? Can you give me 10 quid? Can you give me 20 quid? I need to get this woman to England tonight. And we've been doing that for 30 odd years, and that's still going on up in the north as well. But we've got to stop doing that. You know, but it's just been far too long of patching up women, literally patching them up, sending them off and exporting them, and then bringing them back, and there's no follow-up support for them. And that's something that I understand in domestic violence, because once even a woman has escaped, and she has got to safety, she then has to deal with the trauma of what she's been through. She has to rebuild her life in some way, and we provide a service around that as well. There is no service for women who've been for abortions, who've done it on the quiet, who've done it illegally, who are terrified of anybody finding out. And they're living with this secret that is a wrap around their shoulders and weighing them down. And sometimes in my service, we have to get women abortions because they are pregnant to abusers and they do not want those children. And that is really hard when you're stuck in the arsehole of nowhere, way down here in West Cork, to get a woman where she needs to be. It becomes the arsehole of nowhere when it's time to get. So anyway, Gloria, thank you.
Full of energy. And I just want to say that I got educated about the degree and depth of domestic violence in London. You know, where there was, to my knowledge anyway, the first refuge at the time. And I went home and showed a film that had been made about it on PBS, and that began, you know, we had a few homes as refuges, but we didn't really have battered women's shelters. So, you know, this is the way we learn from each other. And this is also now, we understand, part of a global violence against women understanding, you know, that they're all, in all of its forms, that is sex-selective abortions, talk about complexity, which means that in much of Asia there is a daughter deficit and a son surplus, to sexualized violence in war zones, as we know, from Bosnia to the Congo, honor killings, as we know, domestic violence, all the forms of violence against female human beings, which now collectively mean that for the first time that we're aware of, there are fewer females on planet Earth than males. And, you know, so it's always been there, it's part of the backlash, but we're beginning to see the overall pattern and to understand that men didn't invent this either. They got born into this system that told them that they were not proper men and masculine unless they were most of all not feminine, not, you know, and dominated women and, you know, hooked them on domination. Like racism, it's a supremacy crime. Men don't get anything out of domestic violence. They don't get money, they don't get, you know, it's all about establishing control and supremacy, as racism is too, and one kind of crime predicts the other. So, you know, I think we're, thanks to you and we're beginning to see, I mean, we've always learned from each other. Now I think we're beginning to see the connections among, so that we understand they're not women's issues over here. Every issue has a causal, you know, from the beginning of hierarchy that comes from this ridiculous idea that half the human race is superior to the other half. And we're beginning to see this. You know, I mean, what do they say? God is in the details, isn't it? Okay, maybe, but the goddess is in connections. The goddess is in seeing the connections.
I wondered if you could speak perhaps a little bit about touching on the domestic violence issue, the sort of normalization of violence against women in the media and the way it's reported, because we're seeing, you know, a shocking rise in the rape culture in the media today, you know, across the world really, and it's something that whether we're, you know, actively involved in it or not, it affects every single one of us, men and women.
Yes, we all know this, and I think in the service of saying we've come a distance, I would say that we do now know, by and large, that that rape is not sex, it's violence. I think we've kind of gotten that across now. It's not inevitable, right. But we have not got across that pornography is not erotica. Okay, porne means female slaves in Greek. Eros means love and has, free choice and mutual pleasure. And, part of the rape culture you speak of in the culture of violence is the availability of non-erotic, pornographic, on the web that passes, and because sex education is still suppressed, it almost serves as sex education, pornography on the web sometimes, and sometimes is. It normalizes the idea of dominance instead of mutual pleasure, cooperation, right. We've come a distance, and yes, we have a huge distance to go.
And it also affects, that education, using pornography or anything like that, affects men and women, because, young women will see that and be like, oh, well, this is how things are supposed to be.
Yes,
this is how I should be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I don't know what's happening here in the way of plastic surgery.
Not much.
She said not much. That's so great. I'm moving here. It is kind of epidemic, and you can see that where the feminine role is the most restricted and idealized, and you have to be young and all of that is the most prevalent, right? And pornography is also driving it in all kinds of terrible ways. Not only breast implants, but also cutting off one's labia. This is the fastest growing plastic surgery procedure in order to look ever more like a 10-year-old. I'm sorry to tell you this, I'm sorry to bring you back. But it is. Right? And so, the more we can assert our glorious individuality and humanity and name it, and don't, if you talk about pornography, you're called anti-sex. Excuse me, I don't know anybody who's anti-sex, who's anti-pornography. It's what is mutually pleasurable. After all, this is the country from which came yes, yes, and again yes. Okay, that is a great expression of erotica.
I feel very conscious that my grandfather's in the audience right now. But I think there are positive steps being made in the world of pornography and erotica, and there's a lot of, for example, LGBT inclusive or, queer friendly, happy consensual porn out there these days.
Right.
So if that's something you're into,
It's not about categories, it's about nerve endings.
Yeah. And on that note, moving on. Is there anyone else who's got some chat over here? Who's got some hands? Can we get a microphone? We're on the move. There's one at the back. We'll come to you later.
Some people probably see I'm pregnant, and I felt my baby kick from about 20 weeks, and I know some people feel it earlier. So I think the point the doctor made at the beginning wasn't really responded to, and I think it's an important one. That in a lot of countries where abortion is legal, babies can, or unborn children, fetuses, whatever you want to call it, people can have abortions at 5 months, at 20 weeks. I used to be in Amnesty for years, and they decided to campaign on abortion-related issues. One of the first campaigns that came back to us was related to a woman who had an abortion, a vacuum abortion, beyond 5 months, at which stage the child that was sucked out of her womb would have been able to survive in an incubator. And I don't know how someone could have an abortion at this stage of pregnancy when you can feel there's a living being inside you and not think that you're killing something that's alive. Now I know there are complicated where such women have been offered abortions, sometimes they refused them and said, no, I just want to go. And actually there was a living child who was just a misdiagnosis of a stillborn. So I do think it's complicated, and I don't think, like, I just don't understand as someone who's pregnant, like how you can think it's not something alive inside you. And I don't think it's just my body, there's another being within me. It's not just me anymore, there's another person in here. And before I conceived, I thought I might be able to, because I'm quite old. I'm in my 40s. And we were looking at adoption options, and it's really expensive. Like, it's like 30,000. I just wondered if less people had abortions, would more children be available for adoption? I'm not anti-sex education. I'm pro-sex education. I'm pro-contraception, and I do think there's an ambiguity at the early stage of pregnancy when, you know, like the cells of the egg are still dividing in that, but there comes a stage where it looks like a baby, it looks like a living being, and you can feel it being alive within you. And I'm sorry, I know it's not going to be popular what I'm saying, but I feel really strongly and passionately about it, because my baby's kicking as I'm talking. And for me, it's a baby, it's a real person, I'm talking to it all the time. You can hear what's happening in the world. It's had years. I don't know how to feel. It's okay to kill what's inside me.
It is, I just want to say, it is popular what you're saying. It is popular what you're saying, because the whole point is that you get to decide. Someone else. You know, I mean, the only thing that I would caution about everything you said, which I totally, utterly support, is that you can't imagine that anyone else would feel differently. So I would just ask you to listen to the stories of other women who do feel differently and who feel that, look, it's my heart, my liver, my lungs, my blood circulatory system that's being used here for something I do not want, cannot support. And remember, too, from the point of view of the child, that every child has a right to be born, loved, and wanted. So that but, you know, the reason that reproductive freedom as a principle works is because it protects your right, just as it protects other women's right. It is not dictating.
There's a shower of hands there. I have no idea where to start. There were some people with hands up over here previously, so I feel like I should probably get dibs. And then we've got some hands over here.
Hi, I don't diminish what you do, but I found it very moving.
Can't hear you.
Second the mic is on.
Hi, thank you. I don't mean to diminish what you just said. I found that very moving. I was really touched, but I just wanted to say I always wanted girls, I always wanted children, and I worked with an amazing nanny in San Francisco, and she said, whatever you do, don't get married before you're 30, and if you have to get married, do not have children before you're 30, because the best years of your life between 20 and 30, and you have the most crack. So I basically was so anyway, I had children, and a boy, and I went to the White Witch and Co. She's a fantastic fortune teller, and she said, what questions do you want to have to ask? And I said, is there a little girl waiting for me? She goes, there is, but there'll be 6 sons first. And I said, I think I'll stop. I recently went for a job interview, and they're very much for dotting the I's and crossing the T's. And they said, what you get in your leaving cert, you know, the equivalent of leaving school. I said, I can't remember. I said, well, it's right off the Department of Education, you need to know these things. So I sent off my results, and they came back, and I opened the privacy of my kitchen, and I got passed passed everything. And my son came up behind me and goes, well, that's not impressive. I said, trust me, it isn't. He says, how many points did you get? And I goes, none. And you passed your leaving cert. I goes, well, back then it was different. He goes, well, that's no excuse. So anyway, we had our dinner, and he goes, how'd you get Dad? I said, what? He goes, well, how'd you get him? And I said, well, I didn't get him, love, neutrality. And I raised my sons, I thought, to be asked questions and be equal and everything. So I came down to the Bantry Literary Festival. I've left no food in the fridge. I was at the West Cork Literary Festival. I said, I must take a writer, and Gloria, your name jumped out, and I'm sorry, I didn't know anything about it, I just knew your name, so I Googled you. And can I just say, you're 82.
I'm never leaving this room.
I work with the national domestic violence organisation called Safe Ireland, and we believe Ireland can become the safest country in the world for women and children. And that when we do, this will be the thing we're the proudest of as Irish people. And I get to work with incredible women, like that woman who spoke from the West Cork Refuge, and I'm what you'd call a trial attorney, so I represent women in court who are trying to get barring safety orders, and it's challenging. I've heard you say, Gloria, that we have the law, the problem is it's not applied. We have the law, but the problem is that culture hasn't changed, and that is my day-to-day experience over the last few years with this work. So Safe Ireland are trying to change culture, and to do so in a really big way. So we have a summit on domestic violence in Dublin in November. The first ever advisor to the White House of Violence Against Women is speaking, Lynn Rosenthal. There's incredible people coming from Harvard on gender diversity, Monel Tahaway on why the Middle East needs a sexual revolution, and we would love you to come and speak. I've left my card with who is selling books, but Gabor Mate is coming. There's just incredible people coming to Ireland, so I'd love you to come. And in the spirit of following how you like people to ask questions, I'll tell just a really brief personal story. I came to Ireland from Africa. My great-grandmother was born my grandmother was born in the Sahara Desert. My great-grandmother was a 13-year-old Tubu girl who was taken by a French major in the army when they colonized the Sahara because she was the most beautiful girl in her village. She was made to marry him, and my grandmother was born, and she was then taken by the French government. Her name was changed, her religion was changed to Catholic, and then they tried to marry her off to an older man when she was 17, and she said no, that she wanted an education and became a midwife, and travelled with another girl through Africa delivering babies. And she had a difficult life. My mother and her siblings had a difficult life because of the trauma they came from. But when I was born in the 70s, because of women like you, there was absolutely no doubt that I would go to university, that I would have a career, that I would not have the life that those women who went before me had. And to a large extent I have done that. But my question now is for women of my age and generation, as we grow in power, I see the violence against us and the harassment and the sexual harassment increase. And I had the horrific experience of standing in the High Court in London last summer, and as I stood, my shirt came out at the top of my trousers, and the senior counsel barrister standing behind me put his hand down the back of my trousers and pinched my bottom.
Oh my God.
And I turned around in front of the whole courtroom, I haven't been this brave before, and said, Mr. Wilson Smith, I have punched more important barristers than you for less. You fucking watch it. unfortunately followed by the fact that the 20 people in the room, men and women, lawyers, educated people, a journalist, said nothing. I waited a week and no one asked me what had happened, why I said fuck in the High Court, why I threatened to punch somebody. No one asked until I brought it up, because there was a young Irish female trainee who'd witnessed it, and I was aware that this was the career she was going into. And when I asked them, why did you think I said that? They said, well, we thought something might have happened, but we weren't really sure. So how do we move into equality, move into power, and keep ourselves and each other safe? How do we change how we manage those situations?
Well, you're doing it by standing up and telling us about your grandmother and your mother. I mean, that's incredible. I hope you write it or speak it. That's a huge arc. You're telling us about what happened in a supposed hall of justice. You know, everybody here hears it. You know, we understand that the law and the justice are not the same thing all the time. And I think also we have to understand, we have to think about words, you know, because the law, I mean, politics is what happens, and the law is what happens to men. Culture is what happens to women, but it's all political, you know. So, you know, the more we hear these stories, the more we break down those boundaries and understand the realities, and the more women who are, you know, going to be going into the law, becoming barristers, will understand what they have to deal with and will speak out. But it does also speak to the importance of saying what we see, right? I mean, it would have made a huge difference to her just to have people in the courtroom understand, care, ask, support her, and we just have to remember to do that. So thank you.
Can I just say that a collection of the stories told in this room would just make the most fantastic essay. Like, I would read that in any paper, just, you know, a review of the event or something, and it's just all the stories that have been told would be lovely. I think there were people over on this side of the room. Good, ready with a mic and all.
Hi, welcome to Cork. When I came in here today, some people would be repeal the 8th. I definitely wouldn't have come here had I known, you know. Because to me, repeal the 8th is like, it's very militant in my experience. I have 6 children by choice. I had a miscarriage at 20 weeks, and that little baby was perfect. And to think that you could come along and abort that child is just horrific to me, you know. Like, I suppose I do see it does need to be repealed, absolutely. But what my fear would be, and a lot of my friends were Christians, and you know, there'd be an awful lot of scorning of people with religious affiliations in Ireland now. It's gone the opposite way to long ago. But you know, my fear would be that you bring in the doorway then to partial birth abortion, which Obama repealed in America and brought back in again. At 8.5 months having your baby, your baby is aborted at 8.5 months, fully living. My husband is adopted. And if my husband was, I think his mother would have been 16, 18, she was in one of these homes, you know. And if he wasn't there today, he's a wonderful husband. So, you know, it's very complex, I can understand that. But, you know, it's horrific to me that there's a whole, like, this repeal movement is not representative of all women. It's not representative enough of working women. It's elitist in some ways, you know, intellectual. You know, it's just, I would be a feminist. I have 4 daughters, and I would be a feminist, I would say. But then there's certain militant movements that I would not stand with, you know. It's not representative of an awful lot of people. And so, you know, to say that, oh, like if you had children yourselves, the two of you, I'm sorry, and with all due respect, you know, when you hold a baby in your arms the first time, it's huge. It changes you, like motherhood changes you, you become very, you know, self-sacrificing. You will do it for your child, you die for your child. You know, that is the reality of it. You know, it just, and with all due respect, You know,
What you're not understanding, what I would like to say to you is that the principle of reproductive freedom protects your right to have children, just as it protects other women's right not to have children at a particular moment in time, or not to have children at all, right? I mean, there's an old pre-monotheistic goddess prayer that says this, you know, I bless my brain that I may create the ideas, that I bless my knees so I may bend and not break. I bless my womb that I may create what I choose to create. You know, it is safeguarding your power and others. I respect your power, and I hope you respect mine. I mean, that's the whole ballgame.
Just going to interject for a second, because I think that was pretty high, and this is a really fraught subject, and I think it's important to acknowledge the complexity of the situation across the entire spectrum, circle, amorphous blob of this discussion. But the point that was made about feminism being exclusionary to some women is one that is, I think, you know, all of us here, you know, militant or not militant, I wouldn't consider myself militant.
We don't have an army.
But that is a sad thing. I think that feminism should be for everyone, and I think that My Life on the Road, Gloria's book, is very clear about that fact. There's a great point which really struck for me, because it's something I've experienced, where a woman came up to you and said, "I'm not smart enough to be a feminist, it's not for me," and it just broke my heart, because it's not about that. It should be for everyone, and if people feel excluded by that, it's our responsibility as feminists, hopefully, to make it more accessible and to make everyone feel like they have a space and a voice to be heard in this dialogue.
It's either, you know, as you'll see on the web, there are people who talk about white feminism and black feminism and so on. If it doesn't include everybody, it's not feminism. You know, if it doesn't. And you don't have to use that word. We initially said women's liberation, which I kind of like better, but we chose not to use it so much because it was harder for men to be a women's liberationist. We chose to say feminist.
We've got one down the front here. Okay, is that okay?
Yeah, okay.
I just wanted to say one thing that hasn't been said to the women in here who are talking about late-term abortion, which is, I always, you know, felt queasy about that myself, and I produced a film that I highly recommend to all of you called After Tiller, which is about the last 4 doctors in America that performed late-term abortions. And I suddenly had my eyes opened, because that 8.5-month baby that you say was aborted is a fiction. And you have to be very careful about where you're getting your information from. Fewer than one I know Gloria knows this perfectly well and is avoiding saying this because she doesn't want to get sucked into the good abortion and the bad abortion conversation. Because this is truly and genuinely about bodily integrity and choice. But beyond that, when you make abortion available, less than 1% of abortions happen after 20 weeks. Less than 1% of abortions happen after 20 weeks, and 95% of those happen because there is a fatal fetal anomaly or some kind of threat to the mother's health. So if you want to fight about choice and abortion, let's fight about the abortions that we're actually having and getting. And let's actually have a conversation about everybody's desire, no matter what their place on the political spectrum, to reduce the number of abortions. Because if you pass the law, you know that you have the 8th Amendment here and it has not suppressed the number of abortions. So by your own measure, you're failing. The only way to decrease the number of abortions is to get women the health care and education that they need to prevent themselves from having to make that choice to start with. Everybody's on that side. So let's work together on this.
Hi, I have a microphone, so hi. My name is Tara Flynn. I've spoken publicly about having had an abortion. And the reason I'd like to speak today is because I'd like the people who are against my right to choose and other women's right to choose, and I completely believe you have the best of intentions and you have a very strong ideology, which I completely respect, but it is not mine and I don't share it. You have your right to express it and I'm very glad you have, but I would like you to be mindful of the fact that there are many of us here. There's at least a third, probably in this room there's probably way more than a third who have had to travel for abortions or who have had medical abortions unsupervised by doctors. And that can't continue. The fact is, as that wonderful speaker just said there, it's not going to change anything in Ireland except that it will be safe and it will be legal and people will be able to have their friends and their family around them. I went to Holland by myself. I wasn't able to afford to stay over, so I came back the same day, and I don't want that to happen to other women. So I feel very passionate. I feel as passionate about that beautiful speaker earlier who is pregnant, and congratulations, that's an amazing thing. For me, if I can try and let you into my mindset, I felt completely trapped by my body, and then outside of that, trapped by my country and the laws. And I'm going to continue to fight to repeal the 8th Amendment because I know that it isn't the same for everyone. We all need the right to choose what's best for ourselves. We know what we can cope with. I've said it before, I don't go into it because everyone knows about my uterus now, so I have some boundaries. But I wouldn't be here if I hadn't had the opportunity to go to Holland and make the choice for myself. I simply wouldn't be here. Thank you for listening.
You can all just have a fight for the moment. We've not had one from this side of the room for a while, so are you good?
My wife and I are Blowians. We've lived in South Carolina, in Kenmare, for the last 10 years. And for the last year, the only question we are asked on the streets of Clonakilty or Skid or anywhere in Ireland is, could Donald Trump
I know, I so apologize.
And we have to apologize all the time. My answer is absolutely not. Have faith in the center that it will hold and he will not be elected. But my question to you is, in the interview with the Irish Examiner recently, when asked about what you thought about Donald Trump, you said, I can't believe what an asshole he is. And what I would like to, the question I would like to ask is, should he, the goddess forbid, become president of the United States, what would that mean for women in America?
Well, as you know, he refers to women as bimbos, and you know, if somebody asked him about his current wife, if she had to have a mastectomy, would he stay with her? And he said, I'd have to think about it. I mean, you can't make this up. I mean, you know, he is a ridiculously small, insecure man with a grandiose, you know, right, and with, you know, kind of cotton candy hair, and when his coat swings open, you see this gelatinous mass of I don't know where he went wrong in his childhood. I can't address that. But, when I try to explain him, please do understand I'm not trying to justify. It is unforgivable that we have in my country raised him to the level of a presidential candidate. It is partly because one of our two great parties, the Republican Party, which used to be better about sex and race equality than the Democrats were, it was taken over by the old racist Democrats after the civil rights, after the Martin Luther King March, and after the old racist went over and took over the Republican Party gradually. It became a party of extremists, not what it was. And now there is understandable resentment about economic division. There is not understandable resentment about the fact that in about 20 minutes, the United States is no longer going to be a majority European American or white country. And so folks who believe in that kind of hierarchy are in a high state of rebellion or fear. And there is also the fear of violence and the new, the strange, that we're all having with immigration, and So he, who is clear in the sense that he just doesn't say anything except we can win, we can be great again, trust me, I can, which in Hollywood is how they say fuck you, trust me. But I hope and believe, we're going to work our hearts out to not just defeat him, but defeat him big by explaining, when people are asked why they are for him, their first reason is because he is a successful businessman. He is not a successful businessman. If he had just invested the money, the $200 million he inherited, he would be richer than now. He has gone bankrupt innumerable times. He has more than 3,000 lawsuits against him from failure to pay employees and people he's contracted with, and his phony schools. There's just endless problems that in reality, but he does two things. He goes after the success of the other candidate. In other words, Hillary Clinton is the most accurate, and all the fact-checking, that people do of all the candidates, she is the most accurate and the most truthful, more than Bernie Sanders, more than anybody, and so he goes after her for that. It's known in my country as swift boating. Do you remember when John Kerry was running for the presidency, and he was a war hero, so they attacked him, his heroism? It's attacking the strength rather than the weakness. He is big, he is simple, he is on television because unfortunately we depend on ratings. He gets ratings, and advertising depends on ratings. There are all kinds of reasons why he is there. But in real life, he should not be elected, he should be hospitalized.
Can we get someone at the back, maybe? Here, there's a couple. Yep. Thank you so much to the people holding the microphones, by the way, because you're running around. Very good.
Hi. A little bit of everything that's been spoken about here today touches on my life story. And I moved heaven and earth to get here. I have three young boys, the eldest of which I had as a result of a very difficult relationship, very violent, and I have to fight tooth and nail every day just to have a home life for him, just to provide him with some sort of security. I was interested to hear that there's a speaker here working on behalf of Safe Ireland. My personal opinion is that it's pretty impossible to have a society in Ireland with all of the governing bodies in place that will actually relinquish the level of power necessary in order to provide a safe environment for women and a safe environment for their children. I sat in an office in Dublin city centre trying to make the decision whether I would have my son or not. I was advised to go to England. I had had an abortion when I was 16. At 6 weeks gone, next day on a plane with my parents. It was very traumatic. There was an awful lot of shame involved. Ireland being the way it was. And subsequent to that, my life then spiraled a mess. I blew my education, I blew chances in life, and all of those usual things that happen, when you're on that trail. I did get in touch with West Cork Women Against Violence when I moved down here. They were fantastic. They fixed me up with 6 sessions to help me through a traumatic period. So far this year, I've spent 6 days in court with my eldest son's father for nonsense reasons. I've spent 120 days in the last 8 years in court, either in the district court or in the circuit court. He makes applications relentlessly, and a little bit like Donald Trump, but hasn't been as successful publicly. He should be hospitalised as well. However, the law in Ireland doesn't question that. There is no way of having his mental state brought into question in the district and the circuit court in Ireland. It has to come through the High Court, and it can only come at a criminal level. It cannot come, and domestic violence is treated as family law in Ireland. I had a 5-year safety order when I moved to West Cork. It was removed under jurisdictional issues. Little things happened. I wasn't informed. I missed a hearing. I didn't know it was happening. My solicitor was having a bad day. That 5-year safety order was removed. I have no power to stop him doing the things that he does to torment me psychologically. And I wonder, I've knocked on doors, I've written letters, I have asked for help. Nobody really wants to go there. The most comforting response I received was from a woman called Susan Brisson, who is a university lecturer in the US, who wrote a book called Aftermath, and it was her personal response to having been violently raped. And I have experienced all of these things, and I'm here today because I want to connect with strong women. I do not want to live in secret. I do not want to keep my mouth closed any longer. I went on the Camino earlier this year, and after walking 165 kilometers in the lashing rain, why am I doing this to myself? I am not at fault here. I am doing the very best I can. And I stopped walking, and I came home, and now I am just trying to connect with people who actually can make changes. And I'm wondering, how far are people actually in this room willing to go to make it happen? Because every time I try and open my mouth elsewhere, I'm silenced. And the in-camera laws in Ireland make it impossible for the atrocities that are happening all the time in the family law courts to ever be reported on. And the media in Ireland only seems to be interested in reporting on 5 kids taken into care from an underprivileged background, you know, that there's drinking going on, drug addiction. They don't actually want to talk about really sinister stuff that's going on every day, that kids are being brought into, and that women are being left fighting all the time, just to try and have some sort of a normal weekly routine with their children. I'm finding it very hard, and I'm sure that there's lots of women here. I often wonder, would I have been better off? I love my son, he is amazing, he has got such strengths, he has got such charm, people adore him. But I wonder, would my life have been better had I gone to England when I was advised to? You know, I have to ask that question, and I would never, ever judge another person for the decisions that they make. Walk a mile in my shoes is all I can say.
And you gave us a glimpse of your story, and I wonder if there are not journalists here who, you know, would see the particulars and the shared problem of custody of children by, you know, violent. I mean, you know, we have this problem big time in the States. You know, because the judges think that if a woman charges, say, the sexual abuse of her child by her husband, that she's only doing this to blackmail him for more. Because, I mean, you know, there's all kinds of problems. We need coverage of this. You need support. You stood up and said this. I hope from this audience that you will find more companionship and more support. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart for standing up and saying that. And, you know, we need short-term solutions right now, okay? We also need long-term solutions, which I would say is understanding that not only should we raise our daughters more like our sons, but our sons more like our daughters. That they get born into, pushed into this idea of masculinity and domination, and in the extreme, that's what is produced. We have to understand that, if we don't have democratic families, we're never going to have a democratic society. It's from the microcosm to the macrocosm. We have to understand that violence against females, it turns out, is the biggest indicator, more than poverty, more than access to natural resources, more than religion, and more even than degree of democracy. It's the predictor of violence in the streets of any country, and whether or not that country will be willing to use military violence against another country. It is the single greatest predictor of that. And there's, since we're being books today, there's a book called Sex and World Peace by Valerie Hudson and other scholars, which proves this in every major country in the world. In a very, you can prove that violence against females, because it comes first, because we see it in our households, because it normalizes the idea that one group is born to dominate another, then it normalizes domination by race and class and caste and all of the other hierarchies and dominance in general. So, in the service of connections, between this story and the bigger problems, this is it, folks. This is it. I mean, we are onto it right here. Small is not small. It's the seed. It's the seed. So changing that changes everything.
And we've got a question here in the corner.
Hello, sorry.
This one should be next. We've probably only got room for one or two more now, so just warning you all.
Very briefly, again, my name is Hilary Scanlon. I'm involved in the Women's Movement in Tralee, the Women's Resource Centre, run for 30 years, thanks to your example and many more Irish feminist examples. I suppose I have two questions. You asked for announcements about events. I'm not here representing the Asian Amani Dennis, but my friend is very involved in it, so for those interested, there's a seminar on the 8th and 9th of October called Silence and Voice, which I think is very pertinent to today's discussion. And I suppose, Gloria, the Women's Project is massive, and my question to you is, how do you sustain yourself? How are you so calm in this fight for this justice that can be so overwhelming? And thank you again for your efforts.
Why are we who we are? I come from the Midwest in America, which means that you have to be on LSD to know whether we're angry or happy or whatever. I have low blood pressure, that's probably more. But the real thing is, because I get to work at what I care about most and love most every day, and I get to see you. And so therefore, I know I'm not crazy. I know the system is crazy. I know, but part of the good thing about being old, and there are a lot of good things about being old, I would like to say, once you get over the idea that, we're only valuable for our limbs, we're also valuable for our brains. One of the good things, is that you've seen progress and huge change, so you have faith. It's like taking one of those things you have as a child in school. What do they call it? The little, you measure this far and then you wheel it around and it measures. Okay, so if you take where we started to now and turn it around in the future, you can see what's possible. And that's, and that is what keeps me going, and that's what keeps all of us going. And I would just like to say to you from the bottom of my heart, make sure you have in your life, once a week at least, people who care about some of the same things. You laugh at your jokes, get mad at the things you get mad at, because we are communal animals. We can't do it. If we're alone, we come to feel isolated and crazy and wrong. And we need rooms like this. We need You know, we used to call them consciousness-raising groups. Now we call them book clubs. Doesn't matter what you call it, but make sure you have this support in your life. And it is so rewarding. It makes everything else boring, I have to say. It is terrible and angering and revealing in all the ways we've heard, and it is also fan-fucking-tastic.
That's an endorsement for a book club if I've ever heard of it. We've probably got time for one more question. So I'm really sorry to
Or
everyone else.
announcements? Do you all have organizing announcements for each other?
Gloria Steinem, I'm just so delighted to be here today because while I lived in the States for 10 years, I used to subscribe to Miss Magazine, and I've read everything you ever wrote, and I'm always telling my two girls, there's one 22 and the other girl 24 who's working in New York, I always quote lots of stuff that you've written, and I just feel you've made such a difference to our lives as women. When I lived in Chicago, I did go on the ERA march down to Springfield. I didn't get tied down to anything, but you know that wasn't past the Equal Rights Amendment. But for us in Ireland, I just feel you've just changed how we look at things and made our lives so different. I know I have a sign on my fridge which is it's black and white, it says all different, all equal, and I hope my girls and my son will grow up to be good, you know, human beings and make the world a better place, and I thank you for coming here today.
I've got to stop. Are we good? She's fine. Yeah. Got an announcement?
I actually have a question.
Okay.
Hi, Gloria, and welcome to Ireland. I just want to ask you, one of the things, we've been talking about complicated issues and complicated questions, and one of the things that kind of troubles me...
the speaker a bit. Maybe.
Oh, sorry.
Can
you hear me better now? Yeah, one of the things that troubles me is, and I just can't get my head around it, I'm hoping you're going to be able to help me, is sort of the Beyonce thing, the Kim Kardashian thing, these powerful women. And I mean, we all think Beyonce is fantastic and all that kind of stuff, but she does it in her underwear. And Kim Kardashian does it, is a powerful person out of her underwear quite a lot. And it's just about the growth of the use of women's bodies and the sexualization question and kind of being feminist and yet being pornographic. And it's troubling for me, and I need help with the question, with that issue, Gloria. Please help me.
I think there's a big difference between Beyonce and Kim Kardashian. Because Beyonce has a lot of the substance. You know, I mean, she gave a big benefit concert in London not so long ago, and I was there because I was doing the commercial, so to speak, about the money was going to violence against women around the world, right? And she came out in the beginning and she said, you know, I know life is tough, but we're, you know, this huge thousands and thousands of women, but we're together, and for the next hour you're safe. All right, she had me at hello. So, you know, she is a human being who has been somewhat sheltered because she was a child star or a very young musician and so on, but she has values in politics, and she's getting it out there and putting feminists behind her on the stage, you know, in a big way. Kim Kardashian has no content that I'm aware of. It's all about wardrobe. Right? So, and when it comes to nudity in women's bodies, there's nothing wrong with our bodies. We should be able to walk down the street nude and be safe. You know, there's nothing wrong with showing our bodies. The question is whether we are doing it because we want to do it out of pride, or we're being forced to do it because of commercialism and the way bodies are presented and so on. So I think it's what the content is. Those of us who are older, I think, grew up in a time in which to show our bodies was risky and we got a lot of judgment for it. And we are still a little bit there. So we are not so much able to see the fact that young women now are showing their bodies because they're body proud and sex proud. And why not? And I expect to be safe in doing this, and that's okay. So I would just say, look at the substance and trust your instinct. Okay, I just want to say, trusting your instinct is so important. Here's my best thing about trusting instinct. If it looks like a duck and walks like a duck and quacks like a duck and you think it's a pig, it's a pig.
Everyone just here? We've had around it for ages. Yes, it's you. We're giving me the eye.
Hello, my name is Livia Doolan, and I was old. The only thing I want to say is great. I want to say praise. I want to say wisdom. I want to say human. I want to say all about the entire human race, not just women, not just men, the entire awful, incredible, amazing ball of stuff. And so, really today, it's so good for all of the people who are in the room to be here, because conviviality and benevolence and just being is so wonderfully important, so beautiful, so funny, and so great. So thank you, and thank everybody as well.
Half of the blow-in. Back there, I too am from the Midwest. My name is Penny. I trained as a hospice chaplain 20-some years ago, and during that time I had my eyes opened when I worked in the neonate and the NICU departments. I went in with a lot of assumptions, and I saw babies, preemies come in who you would think could never survive. And one parent or another was there every day, 24 hours. Some babies came in and they were assessed, and the team said, oh, they'll be good to go home in a couple of weeks, and they didn't make it. Those are the ones that didn't have the support. We've seen what happened in Romania with the babies who were not held, were not cared for. This is what the idea that I want to implant in all of our heads. And the important thing here, of course, as we are saying, is choice. And the important idea is a larger one about responsibility of care. And there are mothers out there who have families that are too big, and they have lost track of how to care. How do we, as a community, care for those children so they grow up to be lambs rather than pigs? Do they grow up to be full human beings, good men, good women? I think we have to look at a broader picture than just the one in our immediate family.
No, thank you, because it is all about how we are treated, how we are cared for. We are communal. We only empathize with each other when we're together, like now. We need all five senses. The internet is great, and much as I love books, books are great, but you don't create the oxytocin that is the tend and befriend hormone unless you're together with all five senses. So it is all about, as you point out, care, absolutely. And Ceausescu in Romania, that's a great example if we ever need to look at that, as to the forced childbirth with no care and what happened to them. you know, Marx and Engels were smart about a lot of things, but what they didn't get was that the ends doesn't justify the means are the ends. So if we want a loving and caring and individualized and communal and humorous future, we have to have all those things along the way. And thank you for speaking for the care. It is, you know, there's a book also by a man who had to deal with one of the Nazi war criminals when he was captured in Argentina, and therefore was with him for a couple of weeks before he could be taken from Argentina to trial. And what he ends up saying, because this man who's lived a middle-class life and who, you know, was a Nazi before and, you know, created the camps and so on, is that he was completely eviscerated of all self-will by dictatorial parents, by the dictatorship of the Nazi system, that the moment he was captured, he went from being a calm middle-class person to saying, may I eat now, may I defecate now. He could only function on giving orders or taking orders because he had never had that kind of empathy and two-way street as a child. And this, the man who wrote the book, an Israeli intelligence person, said if at the end, if somebody had asked him the path to world peace, he would have said very complicated things. And after that experience, he said, it's how we raise our children. That is totally.
We're going to draw the event to a close now. Thank you. I'm so sorry.
Well, wait. I have a suggestion.
Okay.
Here's my
lost.
voice, we haven't heard it. He had his hand up and he didn't get the mic.
It's very nice of you.
I don't know, I think we should record disruption.
So, thanks for being here today. I obviously don't come from the background that most of you come, and listening to these stories is very interesting to me. I think I'm typically very much outside of this. I'm not exposed to the guest. I'm not exposed to this kind of information that often, right? So I don't see that many men either in the audience, and I'm wondering what you would recommend to bring more men along in this journey, because I think it's going to be important. And I was just telling the girls that the car thing is not going to happen without men, unfortunately, so we need to be pragmatic. If you want to change things, men need to be brought along. And of course, some of us are going to do our best to participate in the family, the raising our children. But I don't see enough men here, and I'm pretty sure there's many men that would like to be here and be part of it. So I think there has to be an effort to make the conversation more interesting and bring in more men. I don't mean interesting, I don't mean good. Not more interesting in the sense of everything that has been said today is terribly interesting to me. It's just to make it very, very clear. More interesting is more voices, men. We're part of this problem. We need to be involved in the conversation. That's all that I'm trying to say.
My analogy for this is the racial situation in my country, right? And when I thought I was doing something for someone else, I might have been minorly useful, but not really. Because I was probably looking for gratitude, looking for reward, I don't know, trying to be a good person. It was only after I lived in India for a couple of years and I came back to my country and I realized how segregated my life was. How I could go snowblind, you know, from all white people wherever I was. how I was being restricted and where I lived and who my friends were and so on. And I think similarly, men become strong feminists and allies when men realize how restricted they are by the masculine role, how deprived of the full circle of human qualities that we all have, male or female. And the masculine role is maybe 2/3 of them. You know, maybe it's, you know, they have wall-to-wall carpeting and people to serve them coffee, but it's a prison nonetheless. Okay? And once men see that and see that they have everything to gain, relationships with their kids, all developing patience and attention to detail and expression and all the things that are wrongly called feminine, developing all those qualities and lengthening your life. You know, we once figured out, at least on the stats in the United States, that if we eliminated all the causes of male death that could be attributed to the masculine role, deaths from speeding, violence, alcohol, I've forgotten them all, men would have like 8 more years of life to live. You know, so I always said to audiences of men, what other movement can offer you 8 more years? I think when we see our enlightened human self-interest in getting rid of these bullshit roles that divide everything, at least we don't have, I mean, old languages didn't even have he or she, they didn't have gendered pronouns. And at least we don't have one that gives gender to tables and chairs. This is good, but it wasn't always this way. It doesn't always have to be this way. Our individual differences as unique human beings are way bigger than our differences by groups of any kind, sex or race. We get to be unique and human at the same time. We get to know that we are linked, we are not ranked. It's so much more fun to understand that. And thank you for saying that, because I do think we need to always say this is in the self-interest, the enlightened long-term self-interest of folks who have been restricted by a so-called superior role. It is not superior, it is bullshit. Okay? As we say in New York.
So what was your suggestion?
Oh, well, my suggestion is, because there's just so much energy and so much everything, heart in this room, that, and I don't know how many of you know each other, but if you, when you're leaving, if you look around and see 2 or 3 people you don't know, introduce yourselves, say what you're doing, what you care about. We have shared hopes in this room. You'll leave here with a new friend, a new colleague, a new job, a new love affair, I don't know. But just something that continues the spirit. I mean, because, you know, the world could be a lot more like this room.
That's a really lovely note to end.
I think that definitely.
First of all, thank you. It's been a marvelous event because of you. And let us not forget that. And secondly, rage against the dying of the light. But I want a special praise for Gloria Steinem's tongue. It's one of the most evocative and elegant.
I'm leaving here with a new feeling of
Never knew you were beautiful.
because it can go up or down.
Honestly, thank you guys so much for today. This has been, in the run-up, probably one of the most daunting events that I've ever chaired, but in the execution, the most enjoyable. So thanks to the festival for inviting Gloria, thanks to, you know, all the volunteers who made the event happen, but lastly and most importantly, can we have a huge West Cork thunderous applause for Gloria Steinem?